Hello, guys, welcome back to another episode here on European Confessions. There is a message that I want to share with you guys, and the message reads like this: European Confessions, please post for me as hidden identity. My grandmother, she initiated me into witchcraft. This was without my consent, and this is my story in detail. Growing up, I was like my grandmother's favorite. She would call my parents and she would tell them that I should come and visit her during the holidays, during the schooling holidays, each and every holiday. I knew that I would be going and visiting my grandmother, and she would make sure that whenever I was with her back in the village, she would always make sure that I was happy. She loved me, and I can say that my grandmother loved me more than all of her grandchildren. Sometimes I thought that it was because my parents, they had money and they were the wealthiest amongst her children, but I realized that it was not that. My grandmother loved me because the way that my father was wealthy. My grandmother would tell me stories and she would sit with me, and whenever she wanted to tell me these weird stories, she would chase away all the other grandchildren. Sometimes when I wouldn't visit her during the holiday, she would keep on calling my parents and telling them that I should come and visit her. Something strange happened to me because when I was born, I was given a name, and this name, it was of my other grandmother, who was my father's mom. But later on in life, before I had gone to secondary, that was when my parents went with me to the home affairs, and then they applied to have my name changed, and they removed my grandmother's name, who was my father's mom, and then they made me to have my other grandmother's name, who was my mom's name. This was really strange. When I was now in secondary school, my grandmother told my parents that I should come and go to school at her house because the school there, she said, was a very good school. My parents didn't agree with this because they always thought that learning in the rural areas was not a good option for me. And anyway, in the city, I was going to a private school. They ended up giving in because my grandmother, she was so persistent and sure that she would never give up on anything that she wanted to be done. And this is how I started staying with my grandmother. One moment I was living a good life in the city, then the next moment I was here in the village. My grandmother used to have a walk around with me whereby she would be showing me cattle, sheep, and goats, and she would tell me about a lot of ghosts, and there were scary stories, the stories that she always told me, especially late at night, because she loved that I used to sleep with her on her bed in her bedroom. And whenever I was with her in her bedroom, she'll be like, when we were still growing, you know, that mountain, it used to be a holy mountain where people were forbidden to go to that mountain during the night because our ancestors, they used to come down and then they would have their meetings in there. The stories that she used to tell me, they were really scary stories. She always told me that she loved me more than any other grandchildren, and she would like to leave her inheritance in my name. And whenever I would look at my grandmother, I would just feel sorry for her because what inheritance was she talking about? I didn't care about the cattle and the goats and the mountains and everything that was in the village. I was a city girl. All that I wanted to do soon after high school was to return back to the city where I knew that I belong there. She would always say that I should look after her children, and I didn't understand because how could I look after my own mom, because those were her children, my mom, my aunties, and my uncles. How was I supposed to look after them since they were all grown up and I was nothing but a child? When my grandmother got sick, I was about to complete my matric and she became very seriously ill. She told people that nobody should come to see her because I was the one who was going to take care of her. But what surprised me is that even though she was keeping this thing as a secret from the rest of the villagers, there were some women in that village who mysteriously knew that my grandmother was sick. Because what used to happen is that sometimes when I would be walking from school, then maybe one woman who was from that village would just stop me. Then she would say, "Go and give this to your grandmother." And when I would open up that small plastic, I would see that usually there will be some leaves from a certain tree, meaning that these were herbs that my grandmother was supposed to use. Then they came this other old lady, and you know from where the village where she came from, it was a very far off place. Not knowing why she had came to visit my grandmother, because my grandmother had never mentioned her name. And before this old woman had came to see my grandmother, she was even struggling to eat. She could no longer speak and was struggling to open up her eyes. But I swear to you that on the day that the old lady came and saw my grandmother, from there on, my grandmother, it was like there was a spirit, a new reviving spirit that had entered into her body. She was now able to communicate, only that you could see that she is really ill, but she was able to tell me a lot of things. Each and every time she would chase away the rest of her grandchildren, but me and her, we would communicate for hours. And because me and my grandmother, sometimes we would speak with each other throughout the night. I started sleeping at school because I had to look after her. She didn't want me to fall asleep at night, and sometimes she would deny the food that was cooked by anybody else. She would only eat the food that I had prepared for her. My grandmother told me that she was going to die, and the date that she was going to die, it was going to be a Thursday. So, like this week, me and her, we were just having a discussion. Then she said, "Ah, my granddaughter, they have just informed me next week on Thursday, that is when I am going to die. And I want to make sure that before I die, I show you the rest of my children so that I can reveal them to you." So I didn't understand. I just thought that my grandmother, since she was really old, maybe her sickness had gotten to her brain and she was now losing her mind. But on that day that my grandmother had told me, the previous night, she got so sick and she got carried by the ambulance. And the rest of my uncles and my aunties, they had heard the news that my grandmother was not okay. They came, but when they came, it was I whom they made to go to the hospital. At that time, my mom was not there. And when she heard that my auntie, the eldest one in my mom's family, had made me to accompany my grandmother to the hospital, whilst they stayed behind, they had a very big argument. And they said that, "What did you want us to do? You know that she favored her daughter above us." So we knew that if we were going to accompany her, she was going to refuse. When my grandmother was admitted into the hospital, she called me and I went to sit and I sat next to her hospital bed. That was when she gave me an African wristband, that one that designed with a lot of beads that are colored. She gave me that wristband and she said that until I am buried, you are not supposed to remove this wristband. So I took it and she made me to wear it whilst she was looking at me. And she said, there is someone who is going to come, and that person that is going to come is going to teach you on how to use this wristband. So I didn't know that these were the rituals that my grandmother was now teaching me. And she said that it was her time, and unfortunately, she had not yet managed to reveal all of her children to me. And I didn't understand, because as far as I knew my aunties, I knew my uncles. So why was my grandmother saying that she still wanted to reveal the rest of her children to me if God had allowed her more time? But unfortunately, her time was fast approaching. After my grandmother had passed away, I kept wearing that wristband. And when we were at her funeral, those same women that used to give me some herbs when my grandmother was sick, they always communicated with me throughout the funeral. Like there is a place whereby you will be standing next to a person where and you and that person, you do not have a relationship at all. Then that person tries to act as if you are into each other. That is what these women from that village were doing, but not all of them, just a select few, those ones that mysteriously knew that my grandmother was ill me. And after the burial of my grandmother, that was when the dreams started. I was supposed to remain there in the village, but I didn't want to remain there. I ran away with my mom and my father when they were returning back to the city. But unfortunately, my father is a strict man. He said that you are only going to move back to the city after you have finished writing your matric exams. So I returned back to the village so that I can finish off my schooling year. Whilst I was back in the village, like the very first day when I returned back to the village, when it was somewhere around 6 p.m., there was a woman who was my grandmother's next door. She came all of a sudden. She was looking for me. And when I had arrived in the village, there was no one who had seen me, but it was like something had told her that I had returned. So she knocked on the door, and when they opened for her to come, it was one of my auntie, and she said, "No, I am not getting inside." Then she called me. So I then went outside expecting her to come into the house and so that she can tell us what she wanted. But she then said that I want to speak with her in private. We then went outside and we were just sitting by the stoop. Whilst we were sitting there, she then said, "There is something that I want to show you, but this thing I can't remove it out of my house because it is very heavy and it cannot be removed by me. It can only be removed by you, since this thing, it was given to me by your grandmother. She had told me that when she has passed away, I am supposed to give you on the day that they are going to bury her. But I didn't want to scare you, and I didn't want to reveal this secret to you in front of all of your relatives. And besides, I saw that you were mourning for your grandmother. So let us go and I will show you everything." I was really scared, but I was curious. I wanted to know. And honestly enough, in my mind, I thought that maybe my grandmother had left some money for me. When you are still young, all that you think about is money. And since she had said that some inheritance, what, so I thought that maybe she had been saving up some money and she had given the money to her neighbor. So I then went there and I was excited. When we got into that woman's bedroom, that was when I saw three dolls, like those Barbie dolls, but these ones, they were really different and weird looking. And she then said that you need to take these dolls because they were given to me by your grandmother. I said, "What am I going to do with such ugly dolls?" My brother, this woman, she then had the audacity. She slapped me and she said, "Why are you saying that your grandmother's children, they are ugly?" That was when it rang a bell in my mind because she had said children. That is the same thing that my grandmother had always told me, that she wanted to reveal the rest of her children to me. So I said, "No, no, no. This thing that you want, I do not want it. Just ban it or anything. I do not want to be part of this witchcraft." And then she said, "I cannot do anything about it because this is your grandmother that we are speaking about." As I was arguing with her, since she had locked the door, I kept on saying, "Please do not make me to scream. I just want to go." And already I could feel that there were tears that had been filling in my eyes because I didn't want to be part of this initiation thing that she wanted to force me into. She was pretending as if she was looking for the keys at this other small drawer that was just next to her bed. I then said, "Why are you lying? Because I can see the keys. You are holding the keys in your left hand." I walked towards her because I wanted to grab the keys. I nearly collapsed to the ground because I didn't see her face. There was just something that was just dark, but no face. It was only her body. When I felt weak, that was when she said, "Oh, the sun has already gone down, and this is my true form." She sat on the bed and she said, "You cannot refuse this because from a very young age, your grandmother has been giving you some herbs so that you can be like us." I could not even speak and I could not even lift my head so that I can see her because the way that she was really scary. She said, "Oh, if I scared you." She took some herbs from her wardrobe. Then she blew some herbs in my face. Immediately, my brother, I saw that those hideous dolls, they were looking really beautiful. They were the most beautiful kids that I had ever seen, and they were jumping around so playful. That was when they gave me this vision. It was like my life was being rewinded right in front of me, and I could see image by image everything that had happened in my life up until the day that my mom gave birth to me. When my mom was giving birth to me, my grandmother, she was there with those small children, those dolls that I had seen, that I had said that they were really ugly looking. They were there waiting for me to come out into the world. When I came into the world, then my grandmother took some charms and started rubbing those charms on my body. Then those dolls showed me that throughout my life they have been accompanying me, going with me to school, sometimes waking me up so that I can play with them late at night. I said, aha, so this is the reason as to why so many times I would wake up feeling very tired because of these tokoloshis. They are really playful, so they used to wake me up, but yet I could not see that these tokoloshis have woken me up, my brother. That is how I ended up being initiated after I had written my matric. I then returned back to stay with my parents. Now, the problem that I am facing is that in this cult, I am going to be told when it will be time for me to get married. And when I look at my age right now, I am all grown up. Most of my mates that I went to school with, they have since gotten married. They have had their children. But as for me, I can't have a child yet. I am still a young lady and I am still too young to be a witch, and in this witch nation I do not want to get involved because I have seen some of the elderly women that are in this large coven that I am in. Most of them, they live miserable lives because they have eaten most of their relatives just feeding the coven. And I know that one day a request is going to be put to me so that I can also offer meat to the coven. And me being a witch, it was not because I wanted to be a witch. I wish to go to church and to be a changed person, but I can't do this because I am a witch. Sometimes when I am passing through the church whereby they'll be playing a loud music, I can even hear my head as if it is cracking. So I am even afraid to go into a church thinking that maybe I'll start manifesting. But I just wish that one day when I'll be passing through the church, instead of me feeling very afraid of the loud music, I should be able to feel happy knowing that if I go there, I can receive something that can cure me.